I'd like to call this meeting of Lakewood City Council for Monday, September 17th to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barth. Councilmember Boki. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Here.
Councilmember Moss. Here. Deputy Mayor Whalen.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Simpson has been excused. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, would you all rise with me in a moment of silence in honor of our men and women serving overseas, followed by the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We now move to proclamations and presentations. The first item of business there is a proclamation declaring September 18th as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. I would ask Ms. Jill Douglas to join me at the podium. This is a particularly poignant proclamation for me personally. My daughter and some of her cousins are running in a race in honor of our 5-year-old great nephew who's battling brain cancer right now. So it's pretty close to home. Whereas each year in the United States, more than 15,000 children from birth to 19 years old were diagnosed with cancer, equal to about 24 childhood cancer diagnoses each day. And whereas each year worldwide there are more than 300,000 new childhood cancer diagnoses, equal to about every 3 minutes a family will hear the words, "Your child has cancer." And whereas although the 5-year survival rate for childhood cancers has reached 80%, nearly 2,000 American children under the age of 19 still die each year from cancer, making it the leading killer of children by disease. And whereas those who do survive will face at least one chronic health condition later on in life, not limited to, but including heart, liver, lung damage, infertility, secondary cancers, and growth deficits. And whereas the causes of childhood cancer are largely unknown and more studies are needed to understand which treatments work best for children, and whereas cancer treatment for children often must differ from traditional adult treatments to take into account children's developmental needs and other factors, and whereas children, including Layla Beckstrand, are among the hundreds of children being treated for cancer in Washington State, and whereas Washington is a caring state and community that supports children and families. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Lakewood Council does hereby proclaim September 2018 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Lakewood and encourages all cities to join in these observances proclaimed this 17th day of September 2018. Don Anderson, Mayor. I'd like to present you with this proclamation and invite you to say a few words.
Thank you on behalf of our family and so many other children for making this happen for all of us. Alexis here was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma at the age of 2 months old with only a 10% chance of survival. And as you can see, she's beaten the odds and is here today. And if she were to be diagnosed today with the same disease, she would be given a 50% chance of survival with how far we've come in the 12 years. She's now 12, but she does have some lifelong things that she's going to be dealing with because of the treatment starting at 2 months of age. But we're very grateful. Nothing's held her back. She's a black belt in Taekwondo and plays basketball and sings and plays the drums and lives life to its absolute fullest. So we're very, very grateful, and our hearts and prayers are with each kid that we meet along this way. So thank you all very much.
that one? Yeah. You're the design guy. We now move to our business showcase. We want to recognize Northwest Design Center, Mr. Alan Reames, owner. Please join Deputy Mayor Whalen at the podium.
Good to see you again. How are you? Good to see you. Yeah, you bet. Good to see you. Yeah. We've got a big plaque, but I don't get to read all of it, just a little bit. Well, I have the pleasure of having been to the Northwest Design Center on several occasions. I built a home here in Lakewood a few years back and got a chance to go over and pick out some carpeting and tile, and these guys do a fantastic job. It's because the Northwest Design Center is where interior design ideas are filtered and refined. A range of vendor products are thoughtfully displayed throughout the 10,000 square foot showroom located here in Lakewood at 4421 98th Street Court Southwest in the Lakewood Industrial Park. The welcoming industrial space is a reflection of owner Alan Reames' business savvy combined with his artistic eye. He laid the foundation for the Northwest Design Center in 2010. That's when he purchased a flooring franchise, and by 2015 he expanded to become a one-stop home design and remodel center. 3 years later, Mr. Reames says his business is the best kept secret in Lakewood. I hope that's not because of wayfinding signage problems or anything like that. So,
Trees.
Trees, yes, exactly. What separates Northwest Design Center from the big box competition is education and a desire by Design Center staff to see clients' visions realized while helping them make informed choices. Along with his top-notch customer service, Reames has prioritized the hiring of veterans. A Vietnam veteran himself, Mr. Reames said, seeing his business succeed with his daughter at the helm helps make him whole. It's because of its commitment to veterans and his priority on integrity and customer service that the Lakewood City Council recognizes the Northwest Design Center as its September 2018 business showcase. And again, I have been very pleased and honored to be a customer. I've gone over there several times. I've met your daughter personally. She's a lovely young woman, and you guys have a great business. There she is. How are you? Yeah. We need to do some more work. Anyway, congratulations. Good to see you.
Thank you.
You need to come on up, too. You're part of the biz. Okay. Well, do you want to say a few words for us?
Yeah, we've been doing this business for about 8 years now, and we are wholly dedicated not only to the city of Lakewood, because we are here, but also to veterans and the veteran causes that are throughout this country and throughout most of our cities. And I'm just pleased to accept this, and I'm just really excited to carry forth and hope to see you some more.
I'm sure you will. Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to see you. President, come on up.
Join them down below.
Considering the Subarea
Okay.
plan so that we can take a more detailed look at the
Okay.
residential use pieces.
Make your motion and we'll hit it. We now move to public comment. This is when any member of the public may speak to any issue of interest to the city, whether or not it is on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. The yellow light will come on as a 30-second warning. The red light comes on when your time is up. Please identify yourself by name and city of residence, such as Marie Barth, Lakewood, Washington. The person who has signed up is Mr. Dennis Haugen.
Dennis Haugen, Lakewood, Washington. American public education is being looked at very strongly these days. The accountability, and Candace Owens is very much a part of leading the way for new ways to make schools accountable from the college level down to the elementary level. I'm looking at test scores here in 1996. We've been on hamster wheel for the last 23 years. They go to colleges and get run off because they're conservative thinkers, not liberal. Sort of the days of political correctness are over. Now they're into violence for controlling thinking in the educational system.
Thank you. That's all the people who have signed up, but if anyone else wishes to speak at public comment, please come forward to the microphone. You aren't precluded by not speaking up, or not signing up, excuse me. Does anyone else wish to speak at public comment? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public comment? Not seeing any approaching, I declare public comment closed. Now move to the consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the minutes of the City Council study session of August 27th, 2018. B, approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting of September 4th, 2018. C, motion number 2018-52, authorizing the execution of an amendment to the agreement with Road Art Construction, increasing construction spending to the amount of $867,203.50 for the Tacoma Gateway LID project. D, motion number 2018-53, authorizing the execution of a street lighting order number 105089192 with Puget Sound Energy in the amount of $94,401.80 for the lighting of the Southgate neighborhood. E, motion number 2018-54, authorizing the execution of street lighting order number 105089029 with Puget Sound Energy in the amount of $149,196.58 for the lighting of Interlochen East, Lake Louise, and West Stillicum Lake neighborhoods. F, ordinance number 694, amending Title V Business Licenses and Regulations to adopt mandatory provisions pursuant to Chapter 35.90 RCW. G, items filed in the office of the City Clerk. 1, Lakewood's Promise Advisory Board meeting minutes of June 7th, 2018, and 2, Public Safety Advisory Board meeting minutes of August 1, 2018.
Thank you. Is there any item which any member of the council wishes to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Moss, seconded by Mr. Whalen, that we adopt the consent agenda. Is there any further comment or questions? Will all in favor please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to public hearings and appeals. Madam Clerk.
This is the date set for a public hearing on proposed land use regulations for motor vehicle sales and rental businesses.
We have, on this, we have Mr. Buer.
Very quickly, Mr. Mayor, this goes back to July 2nd when the City Council adopted Ordinance 689, establishing interim regulations for new and used motor vehicle sales and rental businesses. Thereafter, on July 16th, the Council conducted a public hearing. On July 18th, the Planning Commission conducted a study session on the same subject. Also, on August the 15th, the Planning Commission conducted its own public hearing and thereafter made some recommendations to the City Council for their consideration. There were 4 options that were provided to the Council. Those are listed on page 49 of your staff report this morning, excuse me, it's not this morning. For tonight, the City Council has requested to open the public hearing, accept testimony, and this would come back at your regularly scheduled meeting on October 1st for action. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions from Mr. Buer? Thank you. We now move to public hearing testimony. If you wish to speak on the public hearing topic, please step forward after those who have signed up or read. The rules are very similar to that which we use for public comment. You're limited to 3 minutes. You'll light as a 30-second warning, red light when your time is up. The differentiation is that in the public hearing, the topic is limited to the proposed land use regulations for motor vehicle sales and rental businesses. The one person who has signed up is Mr. Dennis Haugen. I believe I saw Mr. Haugen leave, but Mr. Haugen, if you wish to speak at the public hearing, please step forward.
Dennis Haugen, Lakewood. Just a couple of secrets on zoning and regulations. Got to tell you a big secret. You do not own the land. Number 2, you had nothing to do with the risk that people have to do when they go into business. I've listened to the zoning for years, and there's a couple of facts that are very important. They go all the way back 20 years. The reason that one mall was torn down, another one was built was because of a surprise marketing on Fort Lewis, AFES, which suddenly came into existence and took a very high percentage of the retail market. That caused the first mall to fail financially. Number 2, 1/3 of your citizens are on EBT cards. I used to know some of the people, the developers. You'd call them in here and you would try to tell them what they need to put here and put there. And one of the things that was really funny, we need to have a really nice restaurant in the mall here. Well, there's one nice restaurant already in the mall, and you got people walking in to use the bathroom because you never separated the bus depot from the ability to go in the restroom. But anyway, those are things that questions that real developers and risk takers take into account. Probably what you need for a car lot. Because if 20,000 people are on EBT cards, half of those would be trying to struggle to get ahead, taking jobs wherever they can get them. So maybe you need to have a rent-a-wreck lot. Because a third of your people, you know, are just starting out and scrambling to make it up. But you, every time you talk, you never talk. You know, you're about the real facts. It's kind of like you're sitting in a room. Let's put a mansion over there. And let's put this over here. And it's to a developer who takes risks and often loses, you got to know what your market is and what kind of money the people have got in their pockets that are going to buy something if you're going to build something and sell something. Thank you.
That's all the people who have signed up to speak at the public hearing. If there was anyone else who wishes to speak at the public hearing regarding proposed land use regulations for motor vehicle sales and rental businesses, please step forward. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at the public hearing? Hearing none, I declare the public hearing closed. We now move to ordinance number 695. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, I'm first going to conference call in Councilmember Simpson. Councilmember Simpson?
Yeah.
Okay, we're here to take ordinance number 695, adopting the downtown sub-area plan as an element of the comprehensive plan, amending the Lakewood Municipal Code by establishing a new title, 18B Downtown Development Code, amending Lakewood Municipal Code chapters 18A.02 Administration, 18A.20 Land Use Types and Levels, 18A.50 Development Standards, and 18A.90 Definitions, and amending the Lakewood Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map.
For this, we have Mr. Buer.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this item has been before this group a number of times, at least 7 on my count. You've also been involved in the downtown plan for approximately 18 months. You conducted a study session on this on September the 10th, at which time you indicated that it was appropriate for the council to consider taking action on the document. You have before you the actual ordinance along with the accompanying documents, the comprehensive plan amendments to Title 18A, a new section called 18B, and comprehensive plan amendments. These have all been combined into one ordinance for your consideration this evening. And I think that we've talked about this at great length, so I'm going to end my comments and return the matter back to the council.
Questions for Mr. Buer? Mr. Whalen. Mr. Buer, how do you like the number 8? In terms of if we had you come back and meet again?
Sure, I love number 8.
A couple of quick questions that have come up. Mr. Branster will maybe delve into a little deeper, but I had a question about the housing component, just so we can get that issue kind of on the table for clarity. I'm looking at pages 185 and 214, and specifically, well, let's get to 185 first. The question is whether the plan, when adopted, with regard to residential housing, will require or merely allow mixed-use residential developments within the CBD. As I recall from our 7 times, I think it was highly encouraged but not mandated to be mixed use with regard to residential, but I could be incorrect.
I would like to take you to another section of the document. Okay. That would be found on
214?
Under the form-based code on page 214.
Yeah, 214, yeah. Under uses there?
Yes, and then again on 217.
Okay, so walk us through that just so we have some clarity.
On page 214, it talks about allowed uses, and it begins by talking about all residential uses, civic uses, commercial uses, and their related accessory uses as defined in 18A20, which is the standard code.
Right.
Are permitted in the downtown district, except in the low-impact mixed-use roads district, which is in the vicinity of Lake Grove. Permitted uses are subject to the approval of all required development permits, provided the following uses are prohibited. And then it lists prohibited residential uses, which includes single-family residential levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, group homes, and then this is a new section that was added at the request of the City Council, my recollection. Standalone multifamily residential uses that are more than 1,320 feet from the colonial overlay or town center incentive overlay district, those would not be permitted. Where the opportunity for future commercial use is part of the development standards, multifamily residential uses are allowed. So the desire is to make sure you just don't have large numbers of multifamily units a quarter mile away standing alone. They're not attached to or not a part of the town center or the colonial district. Then on page 217, it's 18B 230, district-wide development standards, which is found on page 216. It talks about density. Again, that starts on the very bottom of page 216, where it says that the maximum density is 100 units per acre, except where conditions are met further within the code where they are reduced. And then it goes on to section 2. On-site allowed a density of 100 units per acre under section 1. Density may be increased to 125 units per acre for affordable housing. And that's consistent with 18A 5740. And then here is the other piece where basically there is a disincentive for doing multifamily development by itself. Rather than having 100 units per acre, the density shall not exceed 80 units per acre for residential-only developments that are not added to or associated with existing commercial sites or that do not provide a first floor height that allows for future commercial occupancies. So those two things are working hand in hand to try to keep standalone apartment complexes somewhat in abeyance in this plan. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't develop at a lower density than 100 acres. That's still allowed because there are no minimum standards. These are all maximums. Mm-hmm. So the question before the council, and this is something that you need to wrestle with, I suppose, are these disincentives appropriate, or is there something more that you would like to see?
Well, with regard to the provision on page 214, I'm just trying to get my mind around that. The standalone multifamily residential use is more than 320 feet from the colonial overlay or the town center overlay district. So what was the thought on the 1320? What's magical about that? It's
not magical. It's just setting a standard in this particular case at 1,320 feet from the town center. If you could not place, for example, standalone multifamily development at the corner of Nyanza and Gravely Lake Drive, because that's too far away. That has to have some level of mixed development. Now, if the 1320 is not appropriate, you want to see something that's smaller, that certainly is something that the council can consider.
Okay, I just wanted to illuminate the issue. Mr. Branster may have had other questions.
I just have a couple of questions, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the same section you were just discussing with the 1320. If I read that, I interpret it that a standalone multifamily unit inside the colonial overlay district or inside the town district is an allowable use. I mean, you can't have one if you're away from it, but it seems like it's saying you can have one if you're inside it.
Can you give me just a second for just a moment, please? You are correct. I was wrong. And the reason it's 1,320 feet is to provide for that walkable neighbor aspect that we are trying to put into the plan.
Well, I think that throughout the document, there are, in quite a few places, that there are references to places of where standalone multifamily projects would be allowed. In some cases under certain conditions, in other cases, that's where they are. Then there are also places of where there is some documents such as the one that you spoke to about density, and there'd be a greater density if you were going to do affordable housing, and we talking about density numbers of 80 or 100 or 125 that are significantly greater density than anywhere else currently exists in the city. As I went through this, I found a lot of interrelated places that relate to the residential use elements of the plan. The rest of the plan seems pretty solid to me. But I'm having trouble reconciling all of the references to maybe you can build standalone residential uses of a number of types, including multifamily, with the comprehensive plan, where the comprehensive plan, the land use element in it, I'm particularly looking at 19-9 in the comprehensive plan, where it talks about revised land use and development regulations to require mixed-use development for any new development except standalone commercial pads and service commercial uses. All of the allowances to allow standalone multifamily uses seem contrary to that element of the comprehensive plan. And when I looked at later in the latter parts of the plan where there is sort of a restatement of the comp plan, that's still the statement that's there. And the term is not promote, encourage. The term in the comprehensive plan is require mixed use. Now, I don't know what we want to do, but when I think through the 7 sessions that we had about discussing this, some of them, most of them, this was not the only topic, and we spent a good deal of time at looking at the design standards. We worked through the transportation elements and what transportation projects and how they would be funded. And we worked through the concept of having a environmental impact statement, but we never really had one that was devoted to looking at the residential uses. And we provided some comments from council to the staff, and there were some things that resulted in the change documents that had to do with the down from 100 to 80. And while we talked about that we as a community don't need the area of the downtown to be where we are promoting affordable housing, it is an opportunity to go to our goal to establish and right the mix of middle class housing here. I don't really know exactly where we want to go through. I mean, I could sit here and offer a dozen amendments to try to straighten out the housing piece, but I think that it would be better to have one more study session that is focused solely on the residential use components of the plan, because to really be honest, I envision that the residential uses are the most near-term change we will see once we approve something. That those will come before significant commercial and other change that is dependent on more factors than doing that. I guess I can say when we get to that, I am going to ask my fellow council members to delay consideration of the ordinance until October 1st so that we can have a study session on September 24th to look just at the housing elements of this plan and either change the comp plan to say that away from require, or realign things in here that are really going to drive mandatory mixed-use elements, or some hybrid of that to be able to go through and do that. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Wolke. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Buick, a couple of questions on the housing element. So on page 155, it says over 300 respondents to an online survey about the downtown vision showed a strong interest in housing for senior and disabled, mixed use with housing and commercial use on the same site or in the same building, and transitional housing for homeless persons and families. And then without any housing type, the following design factors were heavily favored, and it said site design and architectural standards to ensure quality development, housing in walking distance of work, shopping, or bus service. And it says standalone apartments and condominiums were not favored. Cottage housing was well liked and could serve as a transition housing type along with townhomes. So standalone apartments and condominiums were not favored. So we don't necessarily favor them, but we allow them in this. I guess the other element would be that anybody who came in with the standard operating procedure for developers is to ask for the tax exemption. So is it possible to put in an element where you don't get the tax exemption unless you go mixed use or something along those lines?
You can, currently the council can do that when the multifamily tax exemption application moves forward. When you're considering the conditional certificate, that would be the opportunity to include that language, or you can also include it as a part of this plan.
Okay, so because I guess I do have a concern now where we created a document that seems to be, if Mr. Branstetter is correct, at odds with the comprehensive plan, not in sync with it.
If I could respond to that, if Mr. Branstetter, I'm not sure which document Mr. Branstetter is referring to. If he's referring to our traditional comprehensive plan, that's one set of policies. You also have a separate standalone document, your downtown plan, that's separate in many ways. And I'm not sure if I agree or disagree that there is an issue of non-compliance or inconsistency between the two, because the comprehensive plan is referring to all parts of the city of Lakewood, and this section of this downtown plan is being very specific to one section of the city. I'm not trying to create more conflict here. I'm trying to give an answer.
Mr. Whalen.
Could you look at 260 on our packet real quick and 261? Just maybe this might help a little bit. Because this discusses consistency with the comp plan and the downtown plan. So table 2.1 attempts to provide what is the existing comprehensive plan designation, right? By density and housing type?
Well, this changes it, because currently the comprehensive plan for the city of Lakewood calls it out at 54 units per acre.
Correct.
And here we're looking at between 80 and 100 units per acre.
Right, under the heading mixed use districts, right? And a mixed-use district includes this downtown, which is the downtown area plan that we're discussing now.
Yes.
Okay. So that's what hopefully ties it together, where we are strongly encouraging, but not necessarily mandating, maybe I'm incorrect there, mixed use, meaning some commercial with housing above, multifamily housing above?
A good portion of the plan talks at great extent about having mixed-use housing, but at some point, yes, you're going to have some standalone multifamily,
Okay. But at lower densities?
but at lower densities.
Right. In other words, so we're not gonna have these high-rise 100 to 150 unit multifamily complexes with an absence of some commercial.
Well, this proposal wouldn't allow you to have 150 units per acre.
Yeah, 80 to 100, excuse me. That would be the density.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Bulkey.
So thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions then to dovetail onto the remarks by Councilmember Whalen. What would be the parking requirements if I wanted to build an 80 unit?
You have to give me just a minute.
Okay.
Do you have a chart on that?
I'm sorry. Thank you. One parking space per dwelling unit. That's less than what we currently require, which is 1.5 spaces.
So are you anticipating then that they'll have to dig?
There is some discussion here that if you're going to go up that high, you're going to have to provide for some level of garage parking, yes. Or the city was also, as a part of this plan, is also allowing people to see parking reductions as a part of this proposal by submitting their own parking plan. And in addition, perhaps even allowing the city to use its streets if we have sufficient width to allow for parking off-site as a way of meeting a developer's parking requirement. Now that's new because we haven't had that opportunity yet in the city of Lakewood.
Okay, good, thank you. So my next question has to do, and I apologize, I can't find the page, traffic counts. And on one of the pages I looked, and the traffic count would go from 77,000 vehicles a day to like 190,000. Let's say roughly, not maybe 1.5 times what it is, or 2.5 times what it is currently. And then the design, the road design, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the road design of like Gravelly Lake Drive is designed to look good, but not necessarily move more traffic. So how do we bring this housing down into along with other uses? Hopefully we'd have other uses, plus we'd have a park. Increase the traffic counts by that much and still be able to get people to move around basically based upon the same road system, except I guess we're taking over several roads within the town center area.
We're changing subjects a little bit here, and we're getting into the planned action ordinance, where we start talking about the land use quantity as well as peak hour trips. And then you're looking at 6,658 trips under Alternative 2, which is what the City Council has been considering. Now, this includes the fact that you're trying to improve existing streets, provide for new public streets, and as a result of doing all those things together, the ability to move all of these vehicles through the community. Now, that was part of the analysis that was done as with the EIS. And the EIS was extensive on its traffic analysis for this area.
So then what you've proposed then for, we don't call them impact fees, but let me just call them impact fees, along with what the city is supposed to put in, should be sufficient to make sure that traffic continues to move.
Well, they're not specifically impact fees, they're mitigation fees under the planned action ordinance, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. And basically that fee is about roughly a little less than $2,200 per trip. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the city of Lakewood, the council went ahead and took out some streets in order to reduce the cost down from, I believe it was $40 million down to about 29. And that's, we ended up with that new number. So when we did all this sophisticated traffic analysis as a part of the EIS, we were able to say that this project would not have a significant impact upon the environment or the system or the road system. That was how we got through or to that point.
Okay, so even with the addition of 2,000 people, is that what the number's going to be?
Multifamily dwelling units, you're looking at 2,257 units. And so roughly
5,000 people.
5,000 people.
Along
I
with,
think it was more
along with
closer
what
to-
we're hoping is more commercial activity
Yes.
too. So, and then it says it's sufficient. Did we figure out a way to pay for parks through this fee?
I'm sorry, pay for parts?
Yeah. How are we going to pay for the downtown park? Are we charging a parks impact fee?
The ordinance does have a park, open space park in lieu fee as
Okay.
an option, or the developer can pay, can provide for the parking on site as a part of the development project itself. And that's included in your draft ordinance.
Okay.
There's a mitigation fee. That goes into pot. Yeah, the mitigation fee pot, right?
It goes, the parks, is there a line item depository for the parks mitigation portion of that, or open space mitigation portion? Or does it all go into one pot?
Give me just a moment. On page 206, it does talk about the capital cost for a 2-acre park and then a 4-acre park. And then I'm having difficulty finding it right now.
That's the fee in lieu that's
Right.
contributed for purposes of the park acquisition, I think. Right?
Under page 298, you have the transportation cost estimates. And there you do see that there is a mitigation fee payable at permit issuance. And it talks about the expenditure of funds. If a person, now that's not speaking to a in lieu fee. I'm having some difficulty finding it with all the numbers here. But the way it would work would be very similar. If the developer chose to use that approach, it would go into a separate account and be set aside for that specific use.
I think, at least with respect to transportation, page 299 has a reference to expenditure of funds, limiting them to earmark mitigation.
Here it is on page 245. Fee in lieu of for portion of open space. It talks about it's allowable to in the downtown area, and then there's section or part 5. it talks about the fee payment and use. I'm sorry for taking so much time, but I'm having to go through here and find it.
Complicated order. Any other questions for Mr. Buer? Entertain a motion.
Mayor.
Mr. Branstetter.
Mayor, I would move to delay consideration of ordinance 695 until the regular council meeting on October 1st.
It's been moved and seconded that we treat that as a motion to. No, it isn't. It is continue to a date certain. And just note that if passed, I will be participating by phone because I'll be driving back from the airport. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
That'll be limited to residential housing piece.
Yeah, we'll try to focus on residential housing unless there's something else that a council member gives notice of prior. We'll try to limit the discussion. Or are we going to bring this back for next week? Just on the residential housing piece. Is there, if you want to look at something else, please speak up now, so we don't waste the time of Mr. Buer going back and forth when we can focus in advance. So we'll bring it back for study next week on the residential housing piece, followed by October 1st action.
Okay.
Thank you. So now move to ordinance number 696.
Ordinance number 696, adopting a SEPA planned action related to the Lakewood Downtown Subarea Plan.
Mr. Buer.
Since you continued the first ordinance, you'd want to continue this one as well.
Is there a motion? I take it that's a motion to continue to a date certain being October 1st. Is that correct? October 1st. It's been moved and seconded that we continue consideration of ordinance 696 to a date certain being October 1st. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to resolution number 2018-12.
Resolution number 2018-12, expressing support for changes to the Washington Condominium Act.
Mr. Buer.
Okay, this is a resolution being requested by the Master Builders Association. That's where it originated. And it has to do with the current condominium law in the state of Washington not working as well as it should. And as a result, there's quite a bit of interest in this legislative session to make some changes. So at their request, and this is something I think that's also part of your legislative agenda, it is being requested that the City Council adopt a resolution in support of making changes to that condominium law. There is a draft resolution and background materials contained in your materials this evening. It's fairly straightforward, and that ends my presentation.
Any questions for Mr. Buer? Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Mr. Buer, you know, a position on a piece of legislation before the legislature is normally something that we place in our legislative policies manual. You know, this isn't something that's going before the voters of where we are encouraging something or another. this is a piece of legislation that in fact is anticipated to be introduced in the new biennium by a legislature who is anticipated to be reelected. Do you have any particular insight into our current 28th and 29th district representatives and senators' position on this particular legislation?
On those two particular groups, no, but I can let you know that Congressman Heck is very much in favor of doing this and has indicated such at some housing forums conducted here in the city of Lakewood.
Okay, but what we're talking about here is not a piece of federal legislation, it's a state.
That's correct.
Legislation. And so I understand the Master Builders Association requested that we support it. They specifically requested a resolution, or did they request support?
They requested support, and that support would be in the form of a resolution.
And why would that support not be in terms of a favorable statement in our legislative policy manual and instructions to our lobbyists?
My understanding is that we are currently working on a legislative document that would include this particular action.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not quite sure why we would set a precedent of passing resolutions on individual items of legislation that are not very, very specific. I mean, to be able to go in other than to do that. I certainly don't have any problem with supporting it, what I know of it, okay, and I haven't seen the text. Certainly would like to know what Senator O'Ban and Senator Conway think about it, along with whomever our representatives are or turn out to be. Seems an odd way to go about showing support. As much as I think that the Master Builders Association is an association that has is generally supportive of initiatives that help build a community. Just not sure this is the right way.
I move adoption of Resolution 2018-12.
It's been moved by Mr. Wayland, seconded by Mr. Wilkie, that we adopt resolution number 2018-12. Is there further discussion? Mr. Wayland.
I certainly understand where Councilmember Branstetter is coming from. I don't think it's antithetical to putting it into our policy manual or certainly our legislative agenda by having more express support for this particular piece of legislation. I hope that AWC is likewise supporting this and will include it on their legislative agenda. It's something that there's a senator from Seattle that kind of balked, Jamie, I forget his last name, the last time this came up, and there's hope that he will then this year support this with some good change. Yeah, Jamie Peterson, some good changes. So, you know, the more the merrier, because I think this is something that plays into our long-term goals and frankly into the downtown Subarea plan and our council goals and objectives for more good and better, I use that term, housing that's owner-occupied in some nature. And so having some density that's condo related downtown will be a boon for us. Yeah, so I'll support it.
Yeah, I think it's important that the council officially express its support, and that it's done by council action in session. So a resolution, I believe, is appropriate. I can tell you that Senator O'Ban supports condominium liability reform. Mm-hmm. Washington State is an outlier in the extent to which it imposes continuing liability on condominium developers, and that's why you see so many apartment complexes built, usually to a little bit lower standard, potentially even a lower profit margin for the developers because they're building apartments to avoid the ongoing liability of the condominium laws, which creates great uncertainty. It's also, in our market, a barrier to generational wealth building, and it's a very significant factor in dampening the ability of people with aspirations to break out of generational poverty. One stark statistic that I'm aware of is that if people have the same income level where they can afford a halfway decent apartment, people spending the same money on housing, and condominiums are the lowest barrier entry, will have a $90,000 greater net worth, $10,000 versus $100,000 approximately for a family net worth. And much of that is generationally passed on. And there's a racial component to that too. When you hear people talk of systemic racism, it isn't always the fact that folks would treat people badly. It's that historically, if you're redlined out of being able to enter the housing market, which this liability law carries on in some ways, keeping people from getting in the first place, the next generation can't advance to the same level as someone who has help from mom and dad. So I'm strongly in favor of this measure, and it's a long time coming. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Opposed, nay. And we move to Resolution 2018-13, Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2018-13, expressing support for the Pierce County Rural Library District Proposition number 1.
Ms. Wachter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Heidi Wachter, City Attorney for the City of Lakewood. You discussed this last week, and the council has, in fact, in the past, taken positions pursuant to this method as the legally approved method for the council to speak out on a ballot measure, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from Ms. Wachter? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been pick 'em. Moved by Mr. Branstetter, seconded by Ms. Barth, that we adopt resolution number 2018-13. Is there any further discussion? And note we asked them to do it, so we probably should support it. Well, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We now move to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the council?
There's none, Mayor.
Is there any new business to come before the council?
No, Mayor.
And we move up to reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. I'd like to start off with 3 updates from our team here. The first is a review of our community dashboards, and I'd like to call up our senior policy analyst, Shannon Kelly-Fong, to provide you a status report of some of the work that we've been undertaking, and hope to be able to launch this either the latter part of this year or early 2019. After Ms. Fong, I'd like to welcome up our capital projects manager, Weston Ott, who would like to provide you an update on a couple of options that we're looking at regarding some traffic calming at 112th and Gravely Lake Drive, the proverbial curve there, if you will. And then lastly, I'd like to ask our city attorney, Heidi Wachter, to give you an update on our sewer services area analysis work that we've been doing, and we discovered kind of some language changes that we'd like to recommend to you as it relates to our sewer ordinance, as it relates to use of our surcharge for pay-as-you-go versus debt service. But with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Kelly-Fong.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. I'm here tonight to present on the draft Lakewood Community Dashboard. With the adoption of on June 4th, 2018, of the Lakewood Strategic Plan 2018 to 2020, the city reaffirmed its commitment to collecting and analyzing data to make well-informed decisions and to increase accountability. Under the City Council goal area of transparency, one of the objectives and strategies is listed as the following. 5.3, develop measurable outcomes and compare these to national benchmarks. C, develop an annual performance report card and accessible real-time community dashboard. In effort to start this process, city personnel crafted a draft Lakewood Community Dashboard. The Lakewood Community Dashboard identifies meaningful metrics. Here they're going to be known as key performance indicators. And it also identifies a series of target goals for those key performance indicators. So far, the city has solicited feedback from the Planning Commission and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Members of the public will be able to send additional feedback to the city from the dashboard itself. In addition to these groups, the state auditor also reviewed the dashboard and provided some feedback. So what I'd like to do right now is just walk through kind of the basic elements of the dashboard and then open it up for questions. So what you have in front of you is the landing page of the community dashboard. This will eventually, as the city manager mentioned, be embedded into the city's new website, and it'll have its own page. From the homepage, you can see that it's organized by city council goals. So we have economic development, dependable infrastructure, public safety, fiscal responsibility, and transparency. In addition to these options, you also have 3 additional hyperlinks. One will take you to the strategic plan itself. The other will take you to a fiscal snapshot, which allows you to do some interactive pages. And then the final one takes you to the city snapshot, which provides a really brief overview of the city's demographics. So what you can do on the landing page is select any of the council goals, and it'll take you to a council goal landing page. And on the council goal landing page, it'll provide a very brief update on where particular key performance indicators are. So for example, if you look at your top left-hand corner, you'll see development services. There is a green triangle, and it says on target. There are different categories for KPIs. Currently, there is on target, there is improving, needs work, below target, and then monitor. When you select on one of the KPIs, it'll take you to a KPI landing page. And what this page should do is it should provide a really accessible graph that shows how the city has done in this particular key performance indicator over time. It'll also provide a city target, and some of the targets currently are for the year of 2018, and some of them are for beyond that for 2019 and 2020. It'll explain the KPI measurement. It'll explain the trends that we're seeing longitudinally, and then it'll also connect it to the strategic plan. So on some of the key performance diagrams that are given, you can also dive a little bit deeper. So we'll go back one page. So for example, when we go to building review, up on the top right-hand corner, there's a little arrow. And if you wanted more data on how the city is doing in a particular area, you can select that drill down function and then select the area you'd like more data on. And it'll provide data on specific quarters. And you can select again, and it'll provide you on specific months. So in addition to the KPI pages, which we'll go through here in just a second, I want to just briefly overview the other pages, which are Fiscal Snapshot and City Snapshot. Fiscal Snapshot provides a brief overview of where your taxes go, the operating expenditures and revenue, and then it will eventually provide sales tax. However, that feature is currently not functional. But if we select on where do my taxes go, it provides users a interactive feature where they can select a assessed property value.
Here's the 3.3. Yeah. Yeah. You only have 3.3. You only have the city council members' property here. Yeah.
So for example, I've selected a assessed property value, and it'll tell you what the total property taxes are, and then how much of those property taxes in total goes to the city, and it'll show you where the rest of those funds are going to different entities. And in addition to that, it'll break down the total property taxes going to the city into departments by the city itself based on proportion.
You update the mill rate every year. That's the goal.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Updating the mill rate, obviously, to go after the per assessed value.
Correct. Yep.
You might check the word assessed there. You got an S that's missing up in the upper left.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So every one of these pages will provide you with different KPIs, and the idea is that the public can quickly access information and data on how the city is doing. In addition, the city will be using these KPIs internally. As the city manager said, we intend to launch this late this year or early next year as part of the city's new website. Is there any questions or anything that anybody would like to see?
Questions, Mr. Volkey?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I really, I've been talking about what I called community indicators for a long time. I think, you know, I don't know that this includes everything that I would put in, but I think this is really neat. I think this is a really good step forward. And I think we'll probably use it internally more than, you know, I wish the public would use it more because then we could see that. So I'll ask a question. Street cleaning needs work, which I wouldn't disagree with, but how did you come up with that? That seems like a qualitative kind of question rather than like pavement scores, which is a quantitative question and the engineers go out and look. How do you determine it needs work?
So a lot of the KPIs initially started as performance measures for the departments. Oh. And so for Public Works, they have a set number of miles they would like to see swept. And so the target is based off of that goal. Other indicators weren't necessarily being tracked for performance measures, so there was a little bit of forensic work that had to go on to get it, but it is something that the city is tracking now on in the future. But in the case of street cleaning, there was, I believe it's 18,000 miles. And for some reason, the link doesn't look like it's working right now, so I do apologize on that. It's taking us to demographics, so I will fix that.
Mr. Whalen.
Well, I too, a comment before a question. I think this is fantastic progress, so thank you for all. I know it took a ton of effort and time to put this in, starting with the city council retreat, so you're not done with this yet, obviously. A couple questions following up on Mr. Boke's side, going to dependable infrastructure, for instance. If you could click on that. So the question is the integration of the My Lakewood 311 app into a category, for example, like pothole repair. How might we integrate that so a citizen could really look at that and say, geez, I called 3 of them in this last week and they're saying that they're on track and I feel that they're not on track, and so how are we coordinating data like that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and for 311, there's actually a specific KPI listed under transparency, and one idea we have had is to make that also something that you could access through you know, different council goals like dependable infrastructure. But currently, if you go to transparency and select the 311 KPI, it will provide you information on the data that we receive from the 311 requests. Good. So you could look up something specific like potholes, which I'll do here just for example.
Do we have abatement in here somewhere?
I believe it's in there as well.
In case I had a house that I got exercised about and was having high blood pressure over, I could check on it. Yeah.
Give him some. Yeah.
So if you look at the
Which one?
The 311 data for potholes, it'll tell you the number of requests that we've seen yearly, as well as the average days that the requests are open, and in addition, which departments they're going to. And this is one of those graphs, too, where you could toggle it down and get more information if you really wanted to know, hey, I put in a request last week and I want to know exactly where it's going. It'll tell you what days the requests came in and then how long it took to close out each of those.
Is that kind of mushroom? Yeah. Any other questions?
But the homes under abatement, they'll be in here somewhere?
Yeah, so abatement is currently under, there's one being tracked on 311, it'll be here as well.
Abandoned or vacant property.
But there is a whole page devoted to abatements, and that's under public safety.
Got it. Code compliance then, right? Maybe?
So there's code compliance, and then there's also the rental safety housing program, and abatements is actually under economic development, I apologize.
Okay.
So it's gonna be under the CDGB.
That's not very intuitive, though, if it's under CDBG.
That's because, just because Jeff does them both.
But not in every case, though, right?
No, we're using
We have an abatement fund.
There's NSP dollars and an abatement fund. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of feedback, because I mean, we're gonna have lots of tweaks.
Yeah,
Over
absolutely.
next year, so something that makes someone's eye go right toward it, if they can, under the right category.
Yeah.
Would be great.
What do we have to do to keep the data current on this program?
So the way it's set up, each department director still reports their quarterly performance measures, and the database that this is running off of will auto-update when those are filled out, as long as I hit refresh.
Those are quarterly?
Correct.
And that should probably be indicated here, that it's quarterly somewhere. So when the public's looking at it, they don't think that it's, you know, you could be 90 days out of.
And on that note, not all of the measurements are quarterly. Some of them are 2 years. For example, the ones that are built off of our national citizen survey that we do every 2 years will be reflected on a 2-year basis.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, nice work. We look forward to seeing an even more polished product.
That's great.
Next.
Good evening, Mayor Anderson, Deputy Mayor Whalen, members of the council. I'm here on behalf of Public Works to update where we're at with the curve at 112th and Gravelly Lake Drive over by Clover Park High School, where the Clover Creek condominiums are. They've been here at council before and had public comment. We met with the folks at the condominiums on site. They actually also a second time came here to City Hall. We've been on site and developed 2 options. So currently the road does safely pass about 2,200 or 22,000 vehicles a day. However, what we were looking at is an errant wrong way high-speed vehicle not making that curve, and there's been 3 instances of that in the past, and how to prevent that. So on your packet on page 322 and 323, there are 2 examples of ways to prevent that. One would be a guardrail, and that was the original request by the Condo Association. The second option on 323 would be a much more aesthetically pleasing option, very slightly lower cost, and it could be implemented next spring by Public Works could hire a contractor to do that work.
Have a point on that?
Mr. Whalen.
I was lucky or unlucky enough to be invited over to check out the condos after one of those crashes. And it was pretty interesting to me when you looked at the trajectory of what it took for that guy to go over that thing, over the fence, into the building, and fortuitously no one got hurt. My thought is, in addition to, as long as we're getting a rock out there to build a wall, you know what would really stop a car are some large, artistically placed boulders, truly. Because the wall hits a certain trajectory, but if you popped up a boulder about 4 or 5 feet, that car's not going over. It could go over the wall, but it's not going over one of those BFRs. I mean, those things are huge, and they would look good there if placed right, and they're not that much extra expense. Something to think about.
Correct. So we thought in addition to extending the wall, we would add trees that could act in a similar manner.
Yeah, sure.
But we could also use a large rock.
2 or 3 placed, you know, nicely.
Correct. Yeah, definitely could. We were trying to go with something more aesthetically pleasing than, you know, a hard guardrail right at the edge of the curb. Yeah. And that's a main entrance point to the city right there.
Yeah. We'll have a contest.
I am all for it. from the aesthetic standpoint, as long as we get some large boulders or something in there, or
Okay.
trees, or you could do a
Sure.
cool planter pocket with some, you know, I'm talking a couple of big ones.
Do we, when, Ms. City Attorney, when we intentionally place something to stop a vehicle instead of arrest it safely, are we subjecting ourselves to risk of liability?
Not part of the road.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I don't mean this to be flip, but there's always going to be a theory under which we're liable for what we either did or did not do. I will tell you that there are examples, including in front of the county city building, where rather large planters were put. I was in the county city building the day a car came into the lobby on the first floor, and that is the reason those large planters are out there now. I don't know that they've been sued over that. I could check with WCIA to get a specific answer as to where they see the trends being, and that would probably be the best answer I could give you.
Thank you.
Usually that comes if you have inadequate road design, as opposed to.
Yeah, but we've got a curve here. Yeah. Mr. Branstad.
Yeah, well, I do think that something more aesthetic, like your option 2, is more aesthetic than a guardrail. Surprisingly, is even not that expensive. But this is an intersection that is at the corner of the downtown, and so using option 2 will still create some space for a public art project, you know, which can further both be aesthetic as well as doing some things over there. And I guess I'd encourage for the Arts Commission hasn't actually chosen a spot for their next initiative, but you know, this would be consistent with being in within the downtown plan area. Would be a place that would be seen to be able to go and do that. And while I don't necessarily recommend a second Lotus Blossom, but but something of that size, that is you know, a new design that would be good. This could be a good place for that. That would, and while we're assuaging the residents there with the plan that that you have, in the longer term, this would be you know, a potential public art location.
A big bronze catcher's mitt.
Or a large bronze lancer, or warrior, or a warrior fighting a lancer, or something.
Any other questions from Mr. Ott?
We're telling him option 2. Looks like option 2. Option 2 plus.
Okay, we will go forth with option 2 in the spring. Thank you very much.
Next up, sewer services area update.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Heidi Wachter, city attorney, not an engineer. But the question on this one came down to a question about some of the fees that are currently collected related to our sewer. And it took me into some of the history and some of the legislative enactments that the city has had. At one point, I ran into some opinions that we actually had a sewer utility by virtue of some of what we've built out in Tillicum. And while we did finance that construction, the city of Lakewood does not operate a sewer utility. We have gone forward in an effort to get sewer throughout the city in a cooperative nature with the county, and we've gotten financing every which way we can. And toward that end, the question is, okay, well, what's next for the city of Lakewood if the goal is sewer throughout the city? One of the concerns, obviously, is how do you finance that, particularly if you're at the mercy of a different provider? And so the question came down to the 4.75% that's currently charged on our ratepayers in the city of Lakewood, and that was part of the financing. It's paying back some bonds that went to finance that construction. And the question was, are we limited to that? The way that the statute is currently worded and the way that we've put that 4.75% onto our ratepayers is through the county as the utility owner, and then we use that money to pay back the bonding. And so right now, the recommendation would be that we make sure that the county who is assessing the 4.75% surcharge knows what they're assessing that surcharge for on behalf of the city, that if it's going to be loosened up, that that's clear and transparent for everyone involved. And then the second piece would be that we would want to make it clear in our own ordinances what we're doing, because right now what we have is a fund that's created under our city code, and it's not particularly restrictive, but it's also not transparent with regard to perhaps having a complete sewer system throughout the city. So that's my degree of ability to address questions the council may have. It really is as to those underpinnings of the ordinances and possibly what options are available legislatively to the council. If you have questions that relate specifically to financing or sewer systems, I will be telling you that I will be getting back to you, and I will be walking in somebody who has the background in either finance or sewer specifically. But with that restriction, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Mr. Whalen.
So as I understand your comments in the memo here, it seems as if we need to make this 4.75% surcharge akin to what we do with the availability fee now?
Those are two different amounts. And as I looked into this, the availability fee is actually, or should be, a dwindling amount, because what it is it's for people who haven't hooked up. It is an individualized cost to the person who would be a sewer user if they would hook up.
But it's
that is a fee.
Required to be used for sewer-related infrastructure projects as opposed to dumped into the general fund for parks.
Correct. It could be used for something like that. As an individual fee, it goes into, for lack of a better description, the fee bucket, and fees are for particular purposes. The surcharge, by contrast, as an evenly applied amount throughout the rate-paying base, is more like a tax. If not, it is a tax. It could go to a more general purpose.
Ixnay on the tax A. Right.
There are two types of money in this analysis. This is the other type of money. The two that you've described are two types of money.
So we reduce the restriction and we can use the 4.75% surcharge for general fund purposes.
That is consistent with my analysis, yes.
Mr. Mayor, are you done?
Any other questions from Mr. Balke?
So a couple of questions along those lines. It's clear then that in 2004, the legislative intent of this city council was that it be used for debt service and debt service only.
Yes, that is correct.
So at the time, they believed that, so then that they needed all of it, I guess, for debt service. So do we know how much the 4.75 brings in annually without, just off the top of your head? I mean, we could look up the numbers.
I would have to look the numbers up. I can tell you in my discussions with some of the engineers who went and checked into this, apparently there is room to meet our obligations on the bond and perhaps expand the use of the 4.75. It's not a matter of having to increase that number. That is my understanding based on my discussion with some of the engineers.
Okay, so we have how many public works? You're saying bond. This says Public Works
it's a trust fund loan.
Okay,
that's correct.
So it is. And
yes,
how many loans do we know? And do we know the amount of debt service?
I do not know the amount of debt service.
I mean, I can look it up, but okay.
I can bring that answer back to the council.
You're going to get it next week as part of the second quarter financial report.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's 4 or 5.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Branstetter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Walker, at the time that this tax was initiated, you know, I was a spectator out in the chairs over there, but I seem to recall that this tax was imposed along with a revenue neutral to most homeowners reduction in stormwater fees. And there was some discussion, and did the initiating legislation specify a review period or a review trigger to review whether the tax was still required?
I am not aware of a specific review period for this, and I will get back to you on whether or not there was a stormwater fee reduction at the time commensurate with this amount.
Yeah, I am pretty sure that we reduced the stormwater utilities fees so that it would become to citizens a revenue neutral piece. But I think that looking in the whereases and behind in the legislation, I guess I'd want to make sure that there wasn't some legislative intent stated that once the trust fund loans were repaid that would cause this to sunset, that we would be stepping aside, or whether there was a requirement to review it with respect to a sunset.
Councilmember Branster, those are two different questions. The question about checking back, there's nothing in the legislative history about that, but sunsetting the amount upon the full repayment of the debts is part of one of the ordinances.
So the change that you're recommending would remove that sunset?
That is an option for the council, yes, to remove the sunset. Obviously, it depends on what the revenue is intended for. If the revenue is intended to complete the sewer system throughout the city, you would want the revenue stream to be sufficient to do that. If it's for some other purpose, then that would drive how long you want to have the surcharge be in effect. But right now, it's in effect until the end of the repayment of the Public Works Trust Fund loans.
And the legislation, as it's currently worded, indicated that Public Works Trust Fund loans were limited to working on sewers in Tillicum and Woodbrook.
Yes, according to this, it's the purpose of financing proposed sewer extensions in Tillicum and American Lake Gardens, and then it says only to be used by the city for retirement of debt for the sewer extension to American Lake Gardens and Tillicum, and that the surcharge rate may be reviewed by the city and as necessary will be modified every 5 years by the Pierce County Council. So for this council, it's not something that you have a mandatory review on.
So the Pierce County Council has some authority to review and change this surcharge?
It's their utility. It's our surcharge they impose at our request.
But they give us the money.
They do give us the money, yes.
And so if we want to change the surcharge, we have to ask them to change it for us?
It would be in our interest, in the interest of transparency, and also because they're the ones who put it on the bill. We don't issue sewer bills, and that's where the surcharge is charged.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Wachter.
We will bring you answers to those questions.
Thanks.
Actually, I have some of those answers. The original Public Works Trust Fund principal amounts that was issued back in the early 2000s was about $8 million. Currently, there's about $4.6 million that's outstanding. Annual debt service on that existing $4.6 million on 4 Public Works Trust Fund loans is about $500,000, little over $500,000 a year, and we're bringing in about $700,000 a year in the surcharge. So our request is to have that delta between what we're collecting and the debt service be made available to continue to extend sewers and use those monies on a pay-as-you-go basis. That's basically what we're asking for. Also, the debt service on those Public Works Trust Fund loans, they mature. The earliest one matures in 2024, and the 2 latter ones are in 2028 and 2031. So they're going to be around for a while. And then, if I recall, and this will be coming forward to you in 2 weeks, I think we have 10 or 11 major sewer projects still left to be done. And right now, the way we're doing about 1 every 2 years. We design in year one, and then we construct in year 2. That's, yeah, and that's already included in the adopted budget. It'll be included in your new proposed budget for 19 and 20. Some other updates. I think everybody's aware there was a hurricane on the East Coast, particularly in the Carolinas. And Pierce County actually sent some representatives of their incident management team, including 2 of our employees, our Assistant Police Chief John Unford and one of our sergeants, Andy Suver. They deployed last Thursday and arrived on Friday morning. They actually ended up in New Bern, North Carolina, which ended up being where the brunt of Hurricane Florence actually hit North Carolina. And the Assistant Police Chief, he reported it was quite amazing in terms of the employees that were on call in EOC and how they were handling the emergency, because when they landed, the hurricane was pretty much in full force. And many of the folks that were there have been working straight for up to 72 hours. So they were very pleased to see some folks from Washington State to show up so that they could actually just get some food and some rest. Though as far as getting rest, not everybody could do that because many of them, their homes had been gone, demolished, gone, yet they continue to work, which I think is a very positive reflection of those of us who are public servants and who, no matter what's going on, will do what's right for the community. And so I just wanted to report that, and also just positive reflection on John and Andy for taking that on and going over there and helping, because probably someday we're going to need some help when the big one happens here as well. So. Speaking of emergency management, the federal government, actually FEMA, was actually going to test nationwide all of our cell phones with an emergency alert through their wireless emergency system. And that was supposed to happen this Thursday. However, because of the national emergency down in the Carolinas, that's been put off. And so it's been put off till, we understand, October 3rd. The reason I'm bringing this up, and the city is actually going to put information out to our community, is we don't want to happen what happened in Hawaii earlier this year, where everybody thought it was real. And so that's kind of the danger. Now FEMA is getting word out, and that's great, but Bryn Grimley, our communications manager, is going to be proactive, a couple of days leading up to that, putting that up. So if you see something show up on your phone on October 3rd, hopefully it'll say it is just a test, but I just wanted to alert you, and we'll be alerting the community that that's happening soon. We learned this week, or late last week, or might have been today actually, that the Pierce County Flood Control District did approve our request to use our available funds, which is a little over $300,000 toward the alum treatment of Wahop Lake. And so we're in the process of working with a company called Tetra Tech, who does this for a living. They do alum treatment, they do dredging, they do all that's lakes. As a part of that, earlier this summer, we actually had them take a look at the Brown and Caldwell report that had been done about a year or two ago. And we specifically asked them as well, how about this whole issue of dredging? Could dredging work? And so they said, sure, we'll take a look at it. And so what they reported back was the Brown and Caldwell report. They were very, very complimentary. They like, this is very expertly done, very well done. You've had a good team. So there's, they really didn't have anything to add there. The one area they did point out, and they says, don't hold Brown and Caldwell, don't hold this too hard on them, but, the dredging cost of $15 million, upwards of $15 million, they says, Brown and Caldwell, they were using data that they had, and it was kind of an off-the-cuff estimate. But Tetra Tech, they went a little deeper, and they reported back that it's more like $32 million to dredge the lake. They also went a little bit further for us, and they said that if you were to do that, you would probably have to shut down Fort Steilacoom Park for at least a year. And so we're like, well, why would we have to shut down the park? And they says, well, you would probably have to lay the stuff out on the park. You could certainly ship it all out, but it's likely you would need to use a couple hundred acres just to lay it all out. And just to smell alone, people are not going to want to come to the park. So that would be for at least a year. And then we said, well, is it worth dredging? And they said, yeah, sure, if you have $32 million. And then we said, well, what's the alternative? And they said, well, the alternative is you treat it with alum, like Brown and Caldwell said that you should do. And So basically, long story short, they verified the work that Brown and Caldwell did. And while personally I'd love to dredge that lake, there's $32 million that's not available to do that, as well as shutting down the park for at least 1 year. So I just want to be clear on that as well. But we're working with Tetra Tech. This is something that they do, and they have a good team of scientists that will be helping us with this. And we'll be reporting back to you on that process, if not later this year, in the early part of 2019, with the intent to do the alum treatment in the spring. I think as I previously reported, the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, AKA the Commute Act as we know it, the good news is that the program has been authorized. The Senate had offered an amendment as part of the reconciliation process in committee to fund it. However, that all fell apart on Thursday, and that amendment did not make it through. So the good news is the program has been created, which actually was our goal, just to create it. So we'll be coming back next year to try and get some funding in support of that. And by the way, we have some very, good folks helping us out with this, including Association of Defense Communities, as well as, of course, Mr. Heck and a number of members of Congress. So this has really gained some traction. The Pierce County Regional Council their next meeting is this Thursday, and on the agenda, the topic is training seminar for elected officials, and they're saying, come see how regional planning affects your jurisdiction. And so we've asked for, can we get an idea of what that is, what that means? As of today, we don't have anything other than the one page, what I just communicated to you.
Big regional hug. I asked.
Do you get an update?
I was told Wednesday. We probably get some on Wednesday. I think I'll probably end up going.
I'll be there. I'm, have to be out by about 7 for a concert. 7:30. Keep going.
All right, so we'll look on Wednesday to see all right. For those of you who are attending, and I know the Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Boakley, and Councilmember Simpson all represent the city on that, please do not forget the letter that this body blessed for us to send, not just to Pierce County Council, but also to PCRC, which is as PCRC develops their 2019 work plan to include 3 things. One is, providing direction for the Pierce County Sewer Utility for their capital facility practices to take a more proactive approach in extending and building sewers. The good news is that the sewer utility and the folks in charge are doing that. But I think that needs to be a discussion at PSRC so everybody in the county, particularly those that are served by Pierce County Sewer, are on the same frequency on that. The second is that the City of Lakewood requests that policy direction be developed for inclusion in both the countywide planning policies as well as our individual comp plans so that we have the ability to control and adjust our own population and employment figures as we look out into the future that are specific to our community, as opposed to us just having to, quote unquote, take those numbers. And there needs to be some rhyme and reason on that. And using Lakewood as a case child on that, on population, the city's been around for 25 years, and our population at best has been flat, or you could go back to day one and say our population has decreased. So to say it's going to grow 3 to 4% per year is quite arbitrary and not realistic. Likewise, we have an area of the city where it's expected that the population is going to decrease, which is our air corridor area over time. So so for the folks up in Seattle and elsewhere to think that that's an area for population growth is not consistent with FAA, is not consistent with Department of Defense, and is not consistent with local land use. So I would encourage you to bring that one up. And then, of course, the favorite one is, for PCRC to have a conversation about forming our own MPO. And it doesn't maybe need to lead to that, but I think seriously having a discussion on the pros and the cons, the advantages and the disadvantages of that. So I would encourage our elected officials who attend that to bring those 3 items up. And then as far as your calendar goes, quite busy in September and October. For those of you who are interested, I know the mayor is going to be making some opening remarks. This Thursday at 4 p.m. over at Pierce College, he'll be welcoming the 2018 Japan American Grassroots Summit attendees who are going to be coming over here for, I believe, a couple of weeks and making the rounds. And so there'll be a welcome reception and some entertainment from 4 to 6 over at Pierce College on Thursday afternoon. Also on Thursday, as I just mentioned, from beginning at 6 is PCRC. On Friday evening, this 21st, Partners for Parks is going to be holding a little bonfire event over at Fort Steilacoom Park, where they'll be announcing their next big initiative in terms of what they want to raise money for. On Saturday, the Asia Pacific, over at the Asia Pacific Cultural Center, will be the second annual Korean, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Chuseok Festival, and that'll be from noon to 5 p.m. And then the following week on Tuesday morning, the mayor and I have been invited, and I know all elected officials are would certainly be welcome to this. Congressman Heck's office in the state of Washington, specifically Christina Reaves and the Department of Revenue, Department of Commerce, are going to be hosting an event to launch the Military Spouse Economic Empowerment Zone, which is an initiative by the Chamber, National Chamber of Commerce, to provide military spouses with jobs, in areas that they live. And the goal is, they formed a foundation, and for example, Starbucks itself is committed to hiring like 100,000 military spouses throughout its empire, if you will, not just the United States, but overseas. So pretty exciting event, and certainly given Lakewood's leadership on JBLM and such, they did extend an invitation to us. On September 27th, which is a week from Thursday, Forterra will be having their annual local Pierce County luncheon event. And then that weekend, the 28th, 29th, and 30th, your own Arts Commission is involved in the 6th annual Lakewood Film, Art, and Book Fest, or FAB. And then on Tuesday, October 2nd, the Nisqually Tribe Council contacted us, and they moved out the meeting 1 week. So that'll be not next Tuesday, but rather the following Tuesday on October 2nd. And it'll be over in one of their conference rooms over at their casino on the tribal reservation. And then October 3rd, we have our third quarter employee recognition event over at the police station from 2:30 to 4. October 9th, the following week, which is a Tuesday afternoon at 5 p.m. out at Pavilion in the Park, your county council member and county council chair Doug Richardson will be hosting an in-district meeting, and I know our deputy mayor will be there to provide an introduction to all that's attending. And then October 13th is Truck and Tractor Day. October 20th, the following Saturday, is our legislative retreat, where we'll review state, federal, and county legislative items. And I hope between now and then, if not sooner, to begin to send out some drafts. We're pulling all of that material together as we speak. Actually, we've been working on it for a couple of months now. And then on October 27th, 2 items going on in the morning. Make a Difference Day, of which we will have the ribbon cutting and the dedication for the pavilion in the park, and that will be at 9 a.m. sharp. And then later that evening, EFN will be hosting their annual Abundance Dinner and Auction event at the McGavick Center. So that's what I got. If there's any questions, Mayor?
Any questions for City Manager? Thank you. So we'll move to council comments. Ms. Moss. Not even on your picture. That's quite the photo. Yeah. For those who didn't notice, I hadn't seen it till this weekend, but I won't make any comment about age, but this is in the Lakewood Historical Society's calendar. A picture of McCord Credit Union staff from, about 6 or 7 years ago, and Ms. Moss had a different hairstyle. So, Mr. Wolke.
That's great.
Mr. Branstetter. Ms. Barth.
There we go. So I did attend the Lake City Neighborhood Association meeting last Thursday. It was very well attended, and Paul Busich gave an excellent presentation on the Washington Boulevard Road project. When I first walked in, they had a big sign up saying Washington Boulevard Road project, and I thought, oh my God, do I have to talk about that? And then, because Paul was sitting over on the side, and I didn't see him, and I was so thankful he was there. But he gave an excellent presentation, and I just want to say that, you know, sending folks out, staff out, it just shows such a nice, it's a great representation of our city staff. He was knowledgeable, and so was, I think it was Troy that was with him. Very knowledgeable, very respectful to the questions, and you know, when he left there, everyone commented on, you know, how smart they were, and what a great presentation it was, and great direction that the city is going in. So just a lot of positive comments. And so I just wanted to say thank you to you, Mr. Caulfield, for sending out such great representatives. So thank you.
Comment.
I'm not going to comment on
Mr. Whalen.
Was that a comment or not?
It's a fabulous picture. That's my first comment. Fabulous picture.
Did you see it?
On the 12th, I went to the Pierce College Foundation board meeting with the Board of Trustees for Pierce College, and so it was a good opportunity to mix and mingle with some folks. One of the takeaways from the foundation meeting with the chancellor was whatever we could do to encourage it, whatever next meeting we have at the Pierce Clover Park School Board, whatever meeting we have with them next, is to talk about the great viability of the Running Start program, and the fact that, interestingly enough, the Puyallup School District has so much more support for the Running Start program at Pierce College and Puyallup than we seem to have here with regard to Clover Park and Pierce College in the backyard. In fact, they get more students from Steilacoom than they do from Clover Park. So I know it's a money issue, but it's an issue that they think it's a matter of equity, providing students with opportunities to excel. So I told them I'd pass it along. On the 13th, I was a participant in a telephone interview for what's called a Business in Focus magazine or news article. The mayor and myself and Mr. Caulfield and Ms. Newton chimed in and provided feedback to a gentleman who's writing a positive business focus article on the city of Lakewood, so I thought it went well, and those are good things that we can get out the door for the benefit of the city. That's it.
We mentioned Assistant Chief Unford going back to New Bern. He's part of Task Force 1 deployed out of Pierce County. An interesting process. You know, they're kind of like the National Guard in a way. They're federally funded for all their training, and then when the feds call up and say come, they deploy. And as we learned when we went back to Emmitsburg, the political side of that is you authorize expenditures appropriately so you can get reimbursed. One of my day job's duty is putting the chop on out-of-state travel, in particular all things DEM, and I thought it was amusing when I received an emergency authorization the day they were going out, a one-liner that said miscellaneous meals and snacks, $51,000, which was the anticipated number of days meals for however many people were going out. But it's miscellaneous meals and snacks, $51,000. It's yeah, not out of our budget. Friday, I spent a 10-hour day with some of my old and new good friends on the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, allocating approximately $1 million in recommendations to the county, or to the council for approval, which will be coming up. I wanted to mention a couple of them to you because you might get some community feedback on them. They were in categories where the recommendation is substantially lower than before. Last year, Lakewood Gardens received $45,000. This year, they requested the same $45,000, and it was cut to $30,000. I note that this is not based on the lack of availability of funds, because there were plenty of funds for water-worthy projects. They had substantially contributed to the heads and beds in the past, and hotel industry folks indicated that that wasn't the case in the last year. And on questioning, it seems like they've redeveloped it, redirected their emphasis, and they only held 4 weddings last year, which is the big producer for, not only do they raise money from, it's the big producer for the hotels. And the prices are expensive. No, they don't want to do weddings. It was a policy decision. Why? Too hard on the house, too many volunteer hours. It's too much trouble. But it was a big fundraiser for them, put heads in beds. But with their changes over there, they had a policy decision not to do weddings. So it doesn't justify the expense in the minds of the committee. The other one was our friends at Lakewood Historical Society, and I noted that, you know, it's like your kids, sometimes you love them, but have to tell them no. In 2015, they got $39,500. It went to $35,000, then it went to $25,000. Last year, they were cautioned along the way. You have to do fundraisers. You have to be self-sustaining. This doesn't exactly fit in the program. So it was dropped to $20,000 this year with the same admonition. They put 9 room. They were accounted for 9 room nights for $20,000. What? And they came in with a budget that was way out of balance and didn't even reconcile. A proposed operating deficit of $27,000 if we raised them to $35,000. So they were counting on $10,000 more when we told them last year that they were likely to get less, and they were still $27,000 in the hole.
How much is their rent going up in the new location?
I don't know. Substantially. Right. So those 2 were likely to create some feedback. So I thought I'd give you a warning.
What are some of the big ticket items?
The largest allocations were recommendations were Lakewood Chamber of Commerce, which went from $80,000 to $90,000. It had been $80,000. It had been $78,500 in 14, $80,000 in the last 3 years, and raising it to $90,000 over a 5-year period is barely inflation. It's no increase. It's just an inflationary increase. The Tacoma-Pierce County Sports Commission went up from 60 to 75. They have some very Lakewood-specific programs, which are the ones in the national, part of that's extra expenses, the National Cyclocross Championships, which will be held here in 2019, and they really do put heads in beds, probably better than anybody else. Travel Tacoma went back up to 50. It had been cut to 25 in the past. They've kind of readjusted their emphasis, so it's more in keeping with the innkeeper's emphasis. The city made out well. I think it's $30,000 for media production, $6,000 for summer season concert series, $50,000 for Summerfest, which is up 10. 200 on the capital side. Received all the capital outlays, which were $200,000 for Harry Todd Park, $80,000 for gateway improvements, and $209,000 approximately for Angle Lane.
What do we do on Angle Lane? The parking? piece?
The parking and turning it into one lane with paths on the side, access to the events was the justification. What? The capital part of lodging tax, if it's aimed at building up the events, is the intent. So it's the access for major events like Summerfest, like concerts.
Can they do the concert series for $6 grand?
Don't know.
It's kind of skinny for a whole summer. So.
Yeah. Well, the concert series budget is 16.9, and they allocated $6 grand.
And they're getting 6 out of the 16.9.
Well, they'd asked for 10 of the 16.9. They got 6. And Asia Pacific Cultural Center got 5,000 again, which it got before, but has moved its Samoa Day off Summerfest weekend. So that's good news. Cool. Any other questions? Matters to come before the council? Right. Then we will recess to executive session to discuss performance of public official for 30 minutes. When we will return, we will take no action other than to adjourn. Don't need you. We're in recess. I couldn't see her.
Yeah. So I don't think she got down there yet.
Who is this? Looks very familiar.
How many years ago was that, Mary?
Oh.
Back
What?
back in the 70s.
So was that the predecessor, McCord Credit Union?
Yeah.
So that was before Harbor, huh?
McCord turned into Harborstone when they got a membership expansion, and Fort Lewis turned into ACU.
Okay. Huh.
I had hair.
Or McCord, give me a time on Wednesday that'll work for you.
Sleeping, Mike?
Yeah.
Told you guys once.
They're humoring.